All of you very young and beautiful angels. To be in Vrindavan speaking to you is a dream come true. I haven't been here for many years, and to see all of this going on so nicely is warming my heart. I'm not really very good at these public lectures. I don't get much practice. I've spent most of the last 4 years writing books, so the words flow through my pen and rather than my tongue. But my name is Shyamasunder Das. I was one of the, actually one of four disciples initiated by Prabhupada in San Francisco, January 1967. So that's 51 years ago. Our class this morning is Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th Canto, Chapter 10, Text 18. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Tri Saptaha Piti Puta Pitrabhi Sahate Naga Yat Sado Shakule Chato Bhavan Vaikula Pavanaha. Now somebody ladies. Pitrabi Sahate Naga Yatsuro Shakule Jato Bhavan Vaikula Pavana. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Tri Saptavi, 7 multiplied by 3, that is to say 21. Pita, Father. Puta, purified. Pitrabi, with your forefathers. Saha, all together. Te, your. Anagaha, O most sinless personality, Prahlad Maharaj. Yat, because. Sadho, O great saintly person. Asya, of this person. Kule, in the dynasty. Jata, took birth. Bhavan, you. Vai, indeed. Kula Pavanaha, the purifier of the whole dynasty. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Prahlada, O most pure, O great saintly person, your father has been purified, along with 21 forefathers in your family. Because you were born in this family, the entire dynasty has been purified. Purport. The word tri saptabi means 7 multiplied by 3. In one's family, one can count back 4 or 5 generations to one's great-grandfather or even one's great-grandfather's father. But since the Lord mentions 21 forefathers, this indicates that the benediction expands to other families also. Before the present family in which one has taken birth, one must have been born in other families. Thus, when a Vaishnava takes birth in a family, by the grace of the Lord, he purifies not only that family, but also the families of his previous births. All of us, we were born really educated under the Christian system of time. In our youth, we were taught that all time is marked and begins before and after the birth of Christ. We say it is the year 2018. That's our concept of time. So when we met the Swami in San Francisco 50 years ago, he began to tell us about eternity. Eternity. And actually we began to understand it very quickly, because all of us have an innate idea that we are eternal, that we don't just come here and leave. Our parents and our teachers always taught us that you're born, you live this life, and then you die and either you go to heaven or you go to hell. That's it, one time you get. But everyone has an innate feeling that this is not so. That I am eternal, that I am too precious to be born, learn and go through all of these struggles and then just leave. That's it's too simple, and it's wrong, it's depressing to think that way. Srila Prabhupada taught us about rebirth, that when I leave this body, I take another body. And depending on the work that I do in that body, I develop a body of work, a body of activity, a body of desires. As those develop in this body, when I leave this body, I take another body, dependent on those desires and activities performed in the last body. Srila Prabhupada called this the law of karma. And it seemed so logical. And he used so many wonderful examples to prove this to us. He called it reincarnation. And it's so obvious once you begin to grasp this concept that we're stuck in this wheel of activity, blindly following our desires to reach something we never will in this body. So we have to take another body to try. Prabhupada explained this is God's grace upon us. He wants to give us whatever we desire. So we may take, he used to use the example of a rabbit. If we like sex life, he'll give us the body of a rabbit next time so we can have more sex life. If we like to eat, he will give us the body of a pig so we can eat to our heart's content. So this concept was at the base of Prabhupada's teaching to us, that we are eternal to begin with. We are full of bliss and we are full of knowledge also. These are our original conditions, and we all feel instinctively that this must be so. We're always dreaming of living forever. Everything we do is to immortalize ourselves. Everything we do is try to get as much pleasure from our lives as we can, because we're naturally full of pleasure. And we're constantly curious to find out knowledge, the meaning of everything, because in our natural state we have pure knowledge. Prabhupada used the examples of the child. A child is born, he takes a body in the youth, a different body. The cells in his body may be different, but the same person is inside the body. And then that body ages, gets old, diseased, and it finally leaves a lump of matter on the table. The person inside that body is gone. That's a very easy example. Prabhupada used it over and over and over again. That you take the child, you are born in a child's body, then you become youth, then middle-aged, and then ultimately old, and you die. This transformation, you are the same person inside that body. He used that example. He used the example of the body itself. This hand and this foot and this head, this ear, are all attached to the body, but none of them are the body. It's the driver inside of the body that's controlling all of these pieces. So once you understand, or we began to understand about this eternal life we live, and the reincarnation, and karma, and all of those concepts, it was very easy for us to understand verses like this, when Prabhupada would say that about forefathers and ancestors and future generations, that these are all just various bodies inhabited over time. Not the time that began 2,000 years ago, but time which is gone forever. Another thing that Srila Prabhupada told us right after we understood this was that there is no such thing as accident. We were already sort of tuned into this in the days in San Francisco, going back 50 years ago. We were kind of a generation of seekers, and we began to believe in a concept that one psychologist, Carl Jung, called synchronicity. That means things happen in such a way, almost like magic, which greatly influence your life. Your car starts to run out of petrol, and just at that moment there's a petrol stop in a remote place, and just at that moment there's a petrol station right there. So, or you're thinking about someone, and the phone rings and it's them. These kind of accidents in life. Prabhupada said those don't happen, that there's nothing accidental in Krishna's creation. And this type of magic life, where your life is controlled by coincidence, was very much appealing to my generation. We love to live by magic. And Srila Prabhupada was the most magic person we had ever met. When he explained that living with Krishna, that life with Krishna, surrendering to Krishna's life, automatically brings magic into your life, that was for us. You surrender the cause and effect idea, this reasoning that if I do this, that will happen. You surrender that. Let Krishna decide and perform all of your actions. That's the real magic. We got to see this magic so much around Srila Prabhupada from the first day. I've written a lot of these stories into my new book, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. one of the most amazing magic experiences that I remember was in 1969. We had found this building in downtown London, 5-story building, for our new center, our new headquarters. And even before it was finished, Srila Prabhupada came to live with us. But it was a vast work. The main room, well, not as big as this room, half this size, was every wall and even the ceiling was covered in wood. So thousands of pieces of wood had to be carpentered into place, cut and fastened into place. So the work took a long time. Prabhupada came in September '69, and by end of November, the temple was not quite finished yet, not even finished, and he wanted to leave. So he gave us an ultimatum. The purpose of Prabhupada being there was to install Radha Krishna deities in England. So he announced one day that he was leaving on December 15th. That was 2 weeks away. The temple was almost finished. We were working on the altar, but there were no deities. There was nothing to install in the temple. We had 2 weeks. I was so busy building this temple, I thought, that's not my job. The other devotees have to find some deities somewhere. And in those days, you have to remember, in England especially, there was no place to buy deities. If you wanted deities from India, it was a vast, long procedure. You had to write letters to someone in India to buy the deities, and then somehow or other to get them transported by ship to England. And you had to go through the bank, Reserve Bank of India, to change the money, the Bank of England to send the money. It would have taken months to get deities sent from India. So where are we going to get deities? I don't know. I didn't care. I was building the temple, but I knew Krishna's magic had to happen. There had to be. Prabhupada was there. We announced within 2 weeks we will have a grand opening with deities. And then one morning, I think it was December 3rd, Srila Prabhupada got a phone call from a small Hindu center in East London. It was called East London Hindu Center. And they called him and said that they had just received a set of large marble deities from Jaipur, but that Radharani's little finger on her left hand was chipped. And they wanted Prabhupada to come and see if it was bona fide, if they repaired that little thing, if the deities were still usable, and to bless their deities before they installed them in their temple. So Prabhupada called me to his room. We took the Krishna van out to his place in East London. And we sat in this little room, and Prabhupada talking with these Indian gentlemen in Hindi. We didn't know what was going on. There was Tamal, Mukunda, Jamuna, and one other boy with us, with Prabhupada. But he was so charming. He talked and talked, and once in a while broke into English. But we didn't follow what was going on. And suddenly one man went to the back room, and 2 men, and they brought out this wooden case. They opened it, and there was Krishna, 4.5 feet high. Beautiful, beautiful deities. Prabhupada, all of us fell down. And then Prabhupada glanced at Tamal Krishna, and he said, Tamal, see how heavy that deity is. See if you can pick him up. So with great effort, Tamal picked up the deity. Oh, it's not too heavy, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, take him to the car. And these gentlemen all went like that. And then he looked at me, and this other boy, Radharaman, he said, you guys pick up Radharani, just see if she's heavy or not. So we picked her, take her out to the car. So we were out at the car getting the deities into the van. We looked up and Prabhupada's coming out the door, chatting away with these people. And they're all kind of like that. So on the way back, there's a nice On the way back, I'm driving the van, Prabhupada's sitting in the passenger seat. Those new deities are in the back. Another thing Prabhupada says on the trip back to Berry Place, Krishna has played a great trick. Just like when Krishna's mother tried to tie him with ropes because he is such a rascal, stealing the butter. And by his magic power, he makes the rope too short. So Mother Jasoda brings more rope. Still it is too short. Like that, another trick has been played. Krishna wanted to come here. So this chip on Radharani's finger is just another Krishna's trick. And we have captured Radha and Krishna. Tamal Krishna said, Srila Prabhupada, you are always doing the impossible. You are the greatest magician. Prabhupada answered, I am not magician. My only credit is that I am presenting Krishna as he is. The magic will act as soon as you become a pure devotee of Krishna. The magic will be done by Krishna, not by me or you. So these are the kinds of magic things that were happening so often around Prabhupada. And destiny. Destiny is another word that plays into this whole idea of time and eternity. Srila Prabhupada told us that it was no accident that we few young people were his first disciples. It was our destiny to appear just now to help him spread his spiritual master's mission, which was Krishna's mission. He made us feel important that way. You are destined to help me. Wow, my life is not wasted after all. I'm here for a reason. It's my special destiny to assist Srila Prabhupada in spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. We felt empowered in a way which maybe only few persons get to feel. Like those who drive big change in the world. You know, your Henry Fords, your Bill Gates, or your great kings of antiquity. You feel special and destined to change the world. And Srila Prabhupada explained how we gradually qualify ourselves, birth after birth. How we qualify ourselves birth after birth to achieve certain acts in our present lives. There are 8 million, he told us there are 8,400,000 species of life. And that the special birth that we have taken in an advanced human form, that means in the West, in those days it was in the West where we had such great opulence and such high levels of education. We were the first generation in history after our parents had won the Second World War and gone through the Depression. They had struggled very greatly. Depression of the 30s and then the World War II. But the war machine that was developed to fight that war was turned over after the war to making economic prosperity, booming economic prosperity. Suddenly, my mother, everyone had machines to do all the work. Dishwashing machines, vacuuming machines, cars to go everywhere. First time in history, such a huge segment of the population had the material tools. And they gave us educations. All of us went to college. We learned so much. And as a result of this prosperity, we had kind of leisure time. We had the opportunity to really kind of look around and say, what is the meaning of all of this? So that generation, we were all looking for God. We began to look for God. And we met this Swami who said, God is a blue person. He's very beautiful. He's youthful like you guys are. He dresses in outrageous clothes. He wears peacock feathers in his long hair. He dances with girls all day. He has a beautiful girlfriend. We thought, well, and he just plays with his friends all day. He sports with his friends. We thought, well, this is God. This is a great idea of God. Yes, it must be so. So the special birth that we took, Prabhupada led us to understand that the purpose of that birth was to understand all of this and act on it in what he called devotional service. And by doing so, we would get out of this nasty material world and return to our original position with Krishna in the eternal spiritual sky. How could we even imagine such a life, eternally sporting with Krishna in the spiritual world, without time, without the dual concepts of success and failure, happiness and unhappiness? How can we conceive of such a state, eternal life, full of bliss and knowing everything? Try, you just can't conceive of it. I'm often daunted by trying to conceive of such a life, but I finally concluded that it's so inconceivable that it isn't really worth the intensity of trying to understand it. Srila Prabhupada says that just live your life in full devotional service, and you will one day be free to live and enjoy with Krishna perpetually. I can't even think about that. So there were many struggles. Devotional service is a struggle. It's a hardship. Radhanath Swami recently said in a class that if you think by becoming a devotee your life becomes easier, that's a mistake. Your life actually becomes harder. We worked so hard in those days, it was hard to even imagine now that this body could still be here to working that hard. In England, there were only a few of us, 3 or 4 of us, trying to build this huge temple, build a huge Roth cart, the largest Roth cart that had ever been made up to that time. I was building it single-handedly. Plus all of our other services that we had Sankirtan, we had to raise the money for all this, 6 people. So I'll just read a little passage describing that struggle. Page 295. So my schedule went like this. Work all day on the Rothkar in Balham, that's a suburb of London. Drive to London at dark, work all night at Berry Place, then drive back to Balham at dawn to sleep a few hours. This went on day after day through June and July of 1969. I appreciated like never before the magic of Krishna's energy, realizing how Krishna must endow the Swami with his relentless energy. Swamiji has told us that Krishna gives his devotees the transcendental power to perform inhuman feats in their desire for devotional service. Okay then, Krishna, here's the deal. I want to please my spiritual master, and there's so much work to do, so you may help me or not help me, but without your help, I will surely fail, and Srila Prabhupada will not be happy. So there's no easy way to liberation. You just do it for Krishna and blame the result on Krishna and just keep going, and deeper pleasure will come. You've all felt it. You've all felt it. After extreme devotional activity, the kind of pleasure that you will never find any other way. Why else would you still be working and suffering so much for Krishna? On this topic of suffering, recently I've been hearing in some of these meetings where the later generations saying, "Oh, you early disciples, you suffered so much for your spiritual master." And when I think about that, no, they've got it wrong. Got it wrong. There's a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam where Sandipani Muni, the spiritual master, is addressing his students, in this case Krishna and Sudama. Sandipani said, "O my children, you have suffered so much for my sake. This indeed is the duty of all true disciples, to repay the debt to their spiritual master by offering him with pure hearts their wealth and even their very lives." Sandipani said, "O my children, you have suffered so much for my sake." But when I look back on those days with serving Srila Prabhupada with such suffering, the 24/7 energy we poured into expanding this movement into the world, I asked myself, was this really suffering or sacrifice? No, indeed. In the presence of our newly found master, we were the happiest people on the planet. This indeed is the duty of all true disciples, to repay the debt to their spiritual master by offering him with pure hearts their wealth and even their very lives. The word debt to the spiritual master. Yes, you can say we have felt this, everyone feels this debt, but it's not like an obligation that pressures you to repay it in a way. Srila Prabhupada gave us Krishna consciousness as a gift, and a gift truly given doesn't require repayment. The most precious gift liberates and frees you. It empowers you to give onwards. We gave until we dropped, sure, but our efforts are insignificant compared with Srila Prabhupada's gift to us. And isn't it a little laughable to think that anything we gift to Srila Prabhupada can in any way be considered as paying back our debt to him? In this regard, there's another very cool verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll read it. Prithu Maharaj continued, "How can such persons who have rendered unlimited service by explaining the path of self-realization in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and whose explanations are given for our enlightenment with complete conviction and Vedic evidence, how can they be repaid except by folded palms containing water for their satisfaction?" In the purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada comments on the Sanskrit words in the verse. The word Vinoda Patram means joker. A joker's activities simply arouse laughter, and a person who tries to repay the spiritual master or teacher of the transcendental message of Krishna becomes a laughing stock, just like a joker, because it is not possible to repay such a debt. So by writing these books, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, you can say I'm one of Srila Prabhupada's jokers, attempting without the possibility of success to repay my debt to him. So that's all of us, really. We're all jokers, thinking that our devotional service is in some way, our services are in some way repaying the debt that we owe to our spiritual masters. When I think about how I may have to come back again and again to try to repay this debt, I'm overwhelmed with weakness and futility. Just like trying to think about time. It's an exercise in wasted time. You can't understand it. It's all inconceivable. And my final thought after all such reasoning is, I just pray Srila Prabhupada will be there in my life next time around. He's the only reason I exist. And Srila Prabhupada did promise us. He said, yes, I will be there when you return in your next life. We will start up another ISKCON together. Wherever it is, I will be there, he said. Do not fear. This verse mentions our forefathers. We understood it when Srila Prabhupada said that maybe once upon a time, I was your child, or you were my father, or maybe my mother, or maybe I was the insect, or the frog, or the dog that crawling around the room somewhere with you. When we understood this, we began to see our own families in a different light. My parents were very disturbed when I became a Hare Krishna. But before I met Bhaktivedanta Swami, I was a criminal. My parents were sitting at home watching television one night, and the 6 o'clock news came on, and there was a picture of their son with his hair flying out, who was just arrested for the biggest drug bust in the history of Pacific Northwest. So becoming a Hare Krishna was a little better. My mother came to my wedding a week after Srila Prabhupada arrived in San Francisco in January 1967. And she sat through the whole ceremony and observed the Swami very closely. And she was greatly relieved. She thought, this man from the East is very wise. I think he will help my son. At least he's not causing trouble anymore. And then a couple of years later, my parents came up to meet Srila Prabhupada in Portland, Oregon. And Srila Prabhupada was so gentle and kind with them. He treated my father like an equal. And they both remarked to me later, both of my parents said, what a wonderful gentleman he is. So we've talked about destiny. This is our destiny. Our rebirth, when we get out of here, we're going, I don't know where, but Prabhupada's going to be there. We've talked about the meaningless idea of time. And Srila Prabhupada has made all of these concepts which have troubled the minds of philosophers for thousands of years. Srila Prabhupada has transformed these abstract ideas into facts for us. So simple and clear. I remember there was a meeting in London in September 1971. I was Srila Prabhupada's secretary at the time. And two officers from the Mensa Society came to discuss, actually challenge Srila Prabhupada. Does everyone know what the Mensa Society is? It's a special society in the West where you have to have an IQ of 200 or more to belong to it. It's a society of big brains. So the president and secretary of Mensa, UK Mensa, came to meet Prabhupada and challenge him in his room. I tape recorded this conversation. It was the most amazing conversation I'd ever heard. These guys were throwing out Plato and Kant and this guy and that guy, all big philosophers. And Prabhupada met every rebuttal. He defeated them in every argument. He used logic, Latin, Sanskrit to defeat them. Afterwards, he called me to his room and he said, "You have studied Western philosophy, right?" And I said, "Yes, that was my major in college. I had studied Western philosophers." So he said, "All right, each morning from now on at 8 o'clock, you will come to my room and you will be the philosopher. We will start with Plato, Aristotle. You come, you be the philosopher. We'll go through all the philosophers of the Western philosophy and I will defeat you." So I ran to the bookstore. I got a college outline series of Western philosophers. There was about 2 pages for each philosopher, starting from Aristotle right up to the present day phenomenologists. So this began a 1-year debate, the philosophy sessions, Prabhupada called them. I would come to his room every morning. I would be Plato or Kant or Hegel or Schopenhauer or somebody. We did it chronologically, starting with the Greeks. And I got into it. I was as emotional as Prabhupada got into it. He would yell at me, "You rascal!" And we recorded all of these sessions. After 1 year, hundreds of tapes of Srila Prabhupada, and he defeated me every time. And I wasn't biased. I was really trying to argue this person's point of view. And those philosophy tapes, many got lost, but I think Kirtananda tried to edit them and put them into a book at one time called Dialectic Materialism. Anyway, I've rediscovered and dug up all of these old tapes, and in my 2nd and 3rd volumes of Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, you'll read about Prabhupada's defeat of every Western philosopher in a short form. So Srila Prabhupada, he was the most expert in every subject, every action possible. Whatever it was, Srila Prabhupada was expert at it. He was the expert lawyer. He was the expert politician. He was the expert friend. He was the expert plumber. He was the expert at everything. Whenever there was a problem of any kind, he was a doctor. He knew the answer. You couldn't stump him. Anyway. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Does anyone have any questions or points or stories they'd like to hear? Yes? Ah, that's a good story. Well, first of all, 2 things. I never saw Srila Prabhupada make a mistake of any kind. He could, I mean, if you observe your own actions every day, from the moment you wake up, you'll drop something, or if you're writing something, you'll misspell it, or you'll trip on something. All day long this happens. We're full of error in our activities. But I never saw Prabhupada make a mistake of any kind. I mean, and every move he made was perfect. Everything he did was perfect. And I thought about that a lot. I think probably the reason was that Prabhupada was so fully conscious of every move that he made. That's why we make mistakes. We lose our consciousness of doing something and we make a mistake. The second thing is that I never saw Srila Prabhupada sleep. And this was over a 7-year period. And 2 years of those, more than 2 years of that, I was with him 24/7 as his secretary by his side. There's one little story in my second volume that I almost caught Srila Prabhupada asleep. Do we have time? Okay. I'll just read it. This is 1972. We are in a train going from Mumbai to Madras. After about an hour after the Madras mail had chugged out of Bombay's Victoria Station, and after 15 or 20 devotees had cleared Prabhupada's first-class AC sleeper cabin to find their own seats in second-class coach, the conductor has appeared and punched our tickets, and the door's been slammed and latched to the noisy corridor. I'm suddenly a little shy and awkward to be alone with Prabhupada for this long journey in such cramped quarters. Sure, I'd been alone with Prabhupada much of the time for the past 7 months, but I always had my own space somewhere, a room or hallway separate from Prabhupada, where I would type or transcribe tapes or read or sleep. But here we are, together in this small cabin, crammed with luggage and boxes of food. He's stuck with me for the next 30 hours. Where do I sit? How do I act? What if I pass wind? The first thing Prabhupada does, he starts arranging the gear. Just pull down both beds. There was 2 folding beds on one wall. And put that box under, then that one. Now take out from suitcase 1 fresh dhoti, my chadar, the big one, brown. Now fasten the suitcase and put under. Your case, put here. And prasadam, keep there. In no time, Prabhupada had the little cubicle organized. And he sat in a fold-down seat by the window, looking forward with the train's progress, watching the countryside flow by, chanting on his beads. You may sit on the bed, he said. It's sort of like traveling with my dad. When the train stops at stations, Prabhupada slides the window open, taking in the frantic sounds of travelers and hawkers selling snacks. He calls now and then for a coconut dab or roasted chickpeas wrapped in old newspaper, and the sellers are immediately reverent to see a Swami. Female vendors pull saris over their faces. Prabhupada bargains with them to their lowest price as I shove a few crumpled rupee notes or some coins through the window. Hare Krishna, they shout. Even in these remote villages, the Swami is famous. After a red-orange sunset, the windows darken and Prabhupada asks me to read to him from Krishna book. The story of Krishna and Balaram entering Mathura. I read about young Krishna breaking King Kamsa's bow, exactly as an elephant breaks sugarcane in the field, and watch Srila Prabhupada smile, his eyes closed in pleasure. Then Krishna is wrestling the giant elephant, Kuvalayapida, decorated with drops of perspiration and sprinkled with the blood of the elephant, as he rips out and hoists the ivory tusk onto his shoulder in victory. We chat about this and that, and it's growing late. Prabhupada says he will now do some translating work, and he asks me to bring his books the dictaphone and adjust the light. You may go up now, Shyamasunder, top bed and sleep. Is it all right? I extinguish all but the reading light above his tiny fold-down escritoire, then climb up, spread a chowder over my reclined body, and, drowsing, I watch Srila Prabhupada below. He puts on his glasses, arranges his books, presses buttons on his dictaphone, playing back yesterday's work, and he starts to translate. He speaks slowly and clearly into his microphone, enunciating each word for his faraway editors. Eternal wisdom flows from the ageless author in an uninterrupted, continuous stream. Rail tracks clickety-clack, zzz, from a tiny rewind, ding, 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 receding, a deserted crossing, and I fall into sleep. A far-off moan from the locomotive breaks my slumber. The light is out, and I peer over the edge, down to Prabhupada's bunk, expecting to see him sleeping. I've never seen him actually sleeping. This may be a first. He's on his side in the starlight, legs drawn up, and just then his right eye opens and stares into mine above, with no expression on his face. And his thought pops into my mind. Thought you'd catch me sleeping, huh? Anyway, we brought some copies of this book here to the back if anyone has not seen it yet. Oh, over here. Okay. So, any other points? Yeah.
God brother Suridas was here in Vrindavan. I think it was 1975. He never was able to perform any personal service for Srila Prabhupada. He was a big book distributor. So one day, Tamal Krishnamara said, would you like to go on the road to Srila Prabhupada, lay down under the mosquito net, and if he wants anything, you get it for him. Sura was like, yeah, finally I get to do something. So Srila Prabhupada was laying under the mosquito net, and he closed his eyes, and Suridas said he could see that there was a slight coming from Srila Prabhupada. So he was thinking in his mind, I thought the spiritual master did not sleep. And as soon as he thought that, Srila Prabhupada opened his eyes, his one eye, and he said, do not think your spiritual master is an ordinary man. And another thing is, when I was here with Prabhupada in '76, I was here in Vrindavan for 3 months with Prabhupada, September, October, and November. And Prabhupada would come out in the morning, and he knew if the chowkidar did not ring the bell at 1 o'clock, he would say, why did chowkidar did not ring the bell at 1 o'clock? Or why did chowkidar did not ring the bell at 2 o'clock? There was nothing that got by Srila Prabhupada in service to Krishna.
No, that's right. That's right. I remember another verse that I read yesterday's program. See if I can find it. Can't find it. Never mind.
What did Srila Prabhupada tell those people about Hare Krishna? What did Srila Prabhupada, when he took the deities from those people in East London, what did he, do you know what he told them?
We don't know. It was in Hindi. It was all in Hindi. I think he must have told him something like, I have no idea really what he told him. I don't want to speculate. But the little imperfection that on Radharani's finger, I had the sculptor laureate of England come and repair it. The top sculptor in all of England. He invented the coinage and did busts of Elizabeth and Charles. The personal sculptor laureate of England came and repaired Radharani's little finger. Radha Landaneshwara. Any other points? All glories. Oh, yes. What is that? Huh? Oh, $100 bills falling from the sky. You like magic stories, don't you? Actually, every moment with Prabhupada was so magic that it's difficult after so many years to pick out one that's more magic than another. But that was a pretty spectacular story. In the early 1 year or so after San Francisco got started, nobody had jobs. We were all young devotees, and all we wanted to do was devotional service. Very few people had paying jobs. So there was never any money. And we were feeding hundreds of people a day. Our expenses were high. We were several months behind on the rent for the temple. We thought we might lose it. And one morning very early, Malati and I walked out of our apartment up Ashbury Street towards the temple. It was about a 20-minute walk. It was foggy, early morning. No one else was on the street. And as we walked along, this piece of paper kind of blew in front of me, and I looked at it, and it was a $100 bill. And we looked up, and there were dozens of them coming down like snow from the sky. So we went around, grabbed as many. My dog was chasing them. Grabbed as many as we could we find, and took them to the temple. We thought of that as a true godsend or a windfall. And with that money we paid the rent, we bought a nice rug for the floor in the temple so that it was winter and our feet were getting very cold up to that point. And we were able to feed hundreds and thousands of people with that money. We figured later it must have been a drug deal gone bad, something like that. Drug dealers were the only people who had $100 bills.
I could say one thing.
Yeah. Who has a mic?
As far as the sleeping, there was no one who was around the bed with Srila Prabhupada more than I was. I massaged him every evening, and of course it was always a play because he always looked like he was sleeping, but I was never allowed to leave until he said you can leave. So sometimes I would literally fall asleep as I was massaging him if I was kneeling on the floor, my head would be there. But there would always be that point where he would say, okay, now you can go. But until that point happened, then it could get later and later. I would massage harder because I thought I would rouse him when I thought he was sleeping. But of course he wasn't sleeping, he was just enjoying the massage. You know? But the one time, it was in Mayapur, and it was in the afternoon after his lunch. And it was always every day, you know, it was the same. He had the same formula each day. And he would sit there, and then the one day he just looked at me and he said, "I hate sleep." He said, "It's just a waste of time." He said, "Whenever I go to lie down," he said, "I think now I'm going to waste my time." And then, of course, very angelically, he would just lie down and close his eyes, and he would leave the room. And there was one time in the Manor when George Harrison was there, and he said, "George," because again he was going to go, and he said, "I hate sleeping." He said, "It's just a waste of time." And George's eyes got very big. He said, "Me too, Prabhupada." He said, "I hate sleeping. I have so many things I want to do." And Prabhupada's going, "Yes, yes." He said, "Sleeping is just a waste of time." He said, "I don't like sleeping." But as far as Prabhupada, like you say, he would always, if you thought he was sleeping, he would give you some indication. And as far as the magic of his movements, even as I was dropping over the bottle of oil, massaging him, he would catch it.
Yeah.
Just sitting there, taking the massage, he was so sharp. And he did the same thing with Hari Sari. He purposely, regularly moving around, he hit the bottle, not conscious. You know, that was the difference, as you say.
Yeah.
You've been watching him open his white bag like an art, that zipper, you know. He didn't zip, it was just everything, every movement. It was crazy.
Seeing Shruti Kirti, I remember the old days we traveled together, Shruti and I and Pradyumna.
Yes.
Three of us. We were Prabhupada's camp aides. And Pradyumna Das, he was the Sanskrit scholar, and he was in charge of Prabhupada's translations and transcriptions. And Pradyumna Das went on to lead a very interesting life. He, as a career, was hired by the United Nations in New York to travel around the world and interview holy men, sadhus, swamis, leaders of all religious faiths. So for years, for decades, Pradyumna went around the world and he interviewed every guru on this planet practically, from the Dalai Lama onwards, you know, everybody. He would go to Africa and interview voodoo guys in the jungle, and all over India, every sadhu he could find, he would interview them on behalf of the United Nations, because they would select certain ones to come for these interfaith conferences sponsored by the UN. So I ran into Pradyumna a couple of years ago, and I asked him, I said, "Pradyumna, you've met every holy man on this planet now. How many Prabhupads are there out there?" And Pradyumna threw his eyes back and laughed, and he said, "No one even comes close." Huh? That's saying something. That confirmed. Thank you. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you.